So it looks like they're gonna fix the glass. They put in the wrong glass. I know nothing about windshield glass for cars, but my lane departure feature wasn't working properly after I got the glass fixed. And then I was told by Honda that the reason was because they put in aftermarket glass, and they seemed kind of surprised that there was aftermarket glass in there. Like, a bit concerned. But then they went to the story that, oh, it was the glass fixing place that did it, and they had nothing to do with it. So then I went to the glass place, and I kind of said, you know, this isn't cool that I wasn't told that some safety features wouldn't work properly. Because literally, I was driving like usual in the middle of the lane, and the stick shaker's going, and I'm veering into the center, which is good if I'm veering out of the lane to the right, but I wasn't. So I was kind of veering into oncoming truck traffic on like a truck route, and I was like, what the heck? And I didn't know how to turn it off right away. You know, so it was quite a dangerous situation, I feel, because I'm very particular about driving. I like to have lots of visibility because my eyes sort of work, well, my brain works based on seeing more than habit programming. So I have to be able to see. You know, if there's even a little smudge on the window, I like get a Norwex cloth and clean it off, because I don't like not being able to see very, very well. So to have this stick shaker thing happen and mess up the driving and not knowing, like, that wasn't cool. They should have told me I had to keep those things turned off. And if they did that, I would have said, well, put the proper glass in. If it's extra, I'll pay. But there was some miscommunication or something happening there. I don't care, but what I am happy about, well, I will be happy when I get my car back and they don't charge me any extra. But it seems like they're going to fix the problem. And I was able to communicate that with the Honda service officer and then the business manager, because they helped to set up this repair happening because of how I went away for a month right after I got the car, and then I had to come back and get it fixed after. So they tried to help with that so the air conditioning could be fixed on the same day, but only the glass was fixed that one day and an oil change, and they didn't do the AC. So anyway, long, complicated process. The console's still not working very well. It just shuts off. So they might have to repair that too. So it's a bit of a job to get all this stuff fixed up properly, so I'm not distracted in any way, shape, or form while driving, because that's not good at all. You know, especially being on medications and stuff, one has to be even more careful. I've had people tell me that they had to stop driving because of the medications they take. One person I talked to said that their eyes roll back into their head like this, so they can't drive because their eyes could roll back into their head. And I just felt like, wow, I never want to get to the point where I can't drive because of these medications. Like, that would just suck. Totally. So I'm glad I can drive, and I'm very careful, and I'm a good driver. I haven't, knock on wood, had an accident that was 100% my fault in many years. I've been driving for 20 years. So yeah, the whole time there was one accident I was a little bit at fault when I first started driving, and that's it. So I'm pretty safe, and I want to remain that way. I don't want technology veering me into the center lane. So anyone who has a high-tech car, that the glass has to be the right glass, because there's a camera in the front, and if the glass is warped in any way, shape, or form, or it's not the right glass, it's going to mess up the the feature, and make it unsafe. And anyone knows that if an airline pilot's getting the one piece of information from the instruments, but what's happening is telling him something else, it could be fatal. And that's the same with cars. So we really have to be careful with all this wonderful technology. I'm gonna go to Tim Hortons and get a coffee. But anyway, I kind of wanted to say I'm a bit proud of myself. Not really proud, but I'm saying I was able to communicate, calmly, assertively, non-violently my concerns and how I wished it to be resolved. And I don't really care where the miscommunication was. I just want it to be a safe vehicle for me to drive, and for the features to tell me the right information. So yeah, anyone, if you ever have your windshield replaced and you have a fancy kind of technology car, make sure they put in the right glass, because it could be fatal. So yeah, be careful, y'alls. It's 30 degrees and I might be the only one sitting in the sun on purpose. The other day I sat in the sun for 3 hours straight and I did not burn. And I've said before how years ago I heard Victoria Butenko say wearing sunglasses is part of what causes sunburn on her DVD 12 Steps to Raw Food. And ever since then I've never worn sunglasses, maybe on a rare occasion, and I've never burnt. And I have a really nice tan right now. And like I mentioned, I was in the sun for 3 hours straight in a bikini in probably close to 30-degree weather and no burn. And I think it's also because I've allowed my skin over time to use the mechanisms it has in place in order to adapt, like the skin around the eyes and allowing the light of the sun to come right into the eyes instead of through some kind of sunglasses. When I got back from California, I decided to buy sunglasses because it seemed brighter out in this town than where I used to live. I didn't wear them in California, but I thought, oh, maybe I'm squinting too much because I was in sun in California for so long, and then, having more months of summer and sun than I would be used to living in Canada. And I wore them one day for a couple hours, and then when I took them off, the sun was painful to my eyes, like immediately. So I realized that I'd rather squint a bit and maybe have a bit of a brow furrow than have my eyes be improperly sensitized to the sun. I think sun and light is one of the most important nutrients, and I got an email yesterday about an ebook about the importance of red light or far infrared light, and I didn't buy it. Maybe I could, it was only $2, but I just don't buy things lately because I don't have time to read them, or I don't make time to read them, at least right now. But I think, yeah, light is a really important nutrient, and being able to process it properly, especially as someone who goes into mania, because one of the things that happens is that our pupils dilate. So if we're always wearing sunglasses and then we go into a state where our pupils dilate, then it's sort of relatively dilating even more. So if we're not wearing sunglasses, we go into mania, and we usually wear sunglasses, we're taking in even more light. So having the eyes properly attuned to lots of sunlight, I think could be helpful. Because the light and the warmth does speed up our metabolism. We're metabolic creatures. We're just like anything else that, like the plants grow more in spring and summer. So do humans. Those capacities, when we're not spending energy warming up our body, then we have more energy for other things. And so being properly adapted is important. And after all these years of going in and out of higher and faster brain states, now I'm at this point where I really don't think I need much of anything. Of course there's food, clothes, and shelter. Having a place to sleep and shower. I sleep in a totally dark room. I take medications to sleep. And sometimes when the energy comes in, I feel like I buy stuff to help myself, but I feel like that movement is coming to an end, and I see I don't really need anything. But I feel like I do need quiet. Like traffic noise and TV noise bothers me. I do need warmth. I don't like being cold at all. And I do need the sunlight. So that's why I think it could be helpful to migrate south in the winter. And there are people that recommend doing that, like Dr. Mercola. He moved to Florida to have access to sun year-round. And I can't remember where else I read somebody else saying if you're really affected, go to a sunnier country in the wintertime. And with technology and transportation now, it's not really that impractical to do. So making that possible is something I'm going to work on. And yeah, so many other things. And they fixed the glass in my window, put in a Honda windshield. They didn't charge me anything extra, which I'm very happy about, that they solved the problem without making me incur any of the cost. And also now the lane departure feature works perfectly well. It's not doing the shaking all the time on the highway. I was literally just driving on the same stretch of highway and it wasn't going all nuts on me. So that is awesome. One thing I did notice though is the Honda glass seems to have a bit more of a glare. Like I can see the dash on the windshield, and maybe that's true, I don't know. So I'm glad they fixed that, and also I'm happy about the way I was able to communicate. When they told me at Honda they weren't gonna, like, it wasn't their fault, they didn't put it in or whatever, which is true. I was wondering if they knew something about it, but it's irrelevant because it's fixed. But I spoke with the service manager, and then I asked to speak with the business manager because she was part of the original deal. And I said my point assertively and calmly. I did notice that I sort of said, if my dad finds out about this, he'll be really mad, which is true. But I realized that I was sort of like bringing in his gift in a way of being really mad to make things happen. But then I realized I wanted to try to see if I could communicate on my own, and I was able to. I did have somebody call who was a part of the claim, the insurance claim for the glass, because it was their car, just to clarify something. I don't know what they said, but the glass place ended up calling the manager of that Honda dealership, and then when I talked to him the night before, he said, oh, we might incur a bit of a cost. And then when I went today, he said, you won't incur any of the cost. And then I didn't believe that until I picked up my car, and they indeed didn't charge me. So I think I learned a lot about communication and not needing to call in this type of energy to make it right. Like, it can be made right without getting angry. And I'm angry partly at that anger inside me that I learned from my environment, and I don't want to participate in that. And I was able to not bring that in. I didn't even let anyone else know except for the other person who sold the car to me get a little bit involved. So I'm happy. I'm kind of like, wow, I'm learning to communicate, and communicate in all circumstances, and I don't know if that will keep going, but being able to communicate the truth of what I've experienced in these so-called mental illness things, and then being able to communicate writing a safety hazard on the car that they repaired, making it safe for others as well as for myself. And yeah, it feels good. And now I'm just waiting for a counseling appointment. I picked up 2 more weeks of Zopiclone, and I made an appointment to see my GP. It'll be the first time I'm seeing my GP for so-called bipolar. And a couple of friends have told me about a medication called Nazanan that's good for sleep. It's an antipsychotic that in low doses helps with sleep, because what I'm learning from the situation I'm in now, which is like, it's not my ideal living situation because I'm living with people who have a total different paradigm. So I don't really like to be there. For one, it's too cold with the air conditioning. For two, it's not quiet. All the sound vibrates through the whole house, and I don't like hearing other people's conversations when in my home space. I don't mind it when I'm out in public, but if there's nowhere to go to get some silence and reprieve and relief, then it makes it really challenging. I can even verify that with the Spire device. If I'm out and about all day and then I'm in a noisy coffee shop, I realize it's not necessarily the music but the volume of it, because I was in the same coffee shop, music lower, and I didn't have as much tense breathing as when the music was quite loud. So that's good to know. And it might be a good reason to get those Knops earplugs. We'll see. Maybe. It's a froggy. I thought he was kind of like that moss there. I almost walked right by him. You shouldn't be on the trail. People bike here and you get run over. Come on, keep going. Keep going, silly frog. Keep going. Maybe you're a toad. Yeah, you get off the trail. I don't want you to be roadkill. Come on, keep going. Keep going. Yeah, that's it. Come on, run away from me. Come on, keep going, Froggy. Come on. There, I feel like you're safer up here. That should be good. Now, you stay away. So I found some blueberries that they sell them out of the fridge. So they're nice and cold. So they're ready to eat, but I need to rinse them off. So I'm gonna go to a coffee shop and rinse them off and have a blueberry fest. I stopped by a farm that I marked in my calendar because it said sour cherries in July. So here's a sour cherry. There's the rest of them. I'm gonna try and give them to a friend, and then if they take them, which I hope they do, then I will get more. And the lady said they're really good for gout, which I don't have, but apparently they're really high in melatonin. So it could be something that is helpful to sleep, helpful for sleep. So I'll probably go back and get more and eat a bunch and maybe freeze some. We'll see. But I got that. And when I was driving, it came to mind that another detriment of wearing sunglasses is that when we squint from the sun, we naturally kind of smile. Like, it's hard to squint and frown. It doesn't really happen. So people with sunglasses, they're driving around like, "Mm." Whereas the sun makes us squint and smile. So the world might be a happier place if we allowed the sun to come into our eyes naturally. And those are just the sorts of things my brain comes up with. And there are many often in a day. And just watching someone play soccer. So yeah, I just wanted to stop and say that. And yeah, I feel like this is kind of like a boring period of time in a way. I watched a video on YouTube about, well, it was called An Interview with a Catatonic Schizophrenic. The guy didn't really seem catatonic, he was verbal. But that's what it was titled, and I felt really bad for the guy. It was old footage, and he was saying, if I say that I don't belong here in this mental hospital, the people that don't like me, the psychiatrists, will find a place with worse conditions for me to be. And that's so true. Like, to me, he was speaking a lot of truth. And then he was saying people don't like how I stand, and I think the psychiatrist or the interviewer was asking him to describe that, and he said, I can't describe an image or something. So it was really interesting to watch, and it's the same sort of thing that's happening now. It's like if you say you don't think you're ill, then you don't have insight into your illness or something. So, you know, he had figured out the rules of that game, and by virtue of those rules, he manifested as talking kind of flat. And he was talking about wanting to teach people piano, and the interviewer was saying, well, do you play piano? He's like, no. Do you have anything in place to teach piano? He's like, no. You know, so he could have been tapping into a past life, or nowadays people would say, well, let's get you a peer support worker and see how we can move towards that goal. Obviously, a guy in a psych ward, if there's no piano, he can't move towards that. So to say that it's impossible when you don't provide the conditions to see if it could be true is kind of silly. So, or he could be tapping into his, well, what I call is the adjacent light body, how we were meant to be in this world, and had we not been so morphed and warped along the way, maybe that's who we would be. So for me, when I was little, I felt like I wanted to be a singer, even though I couldn't sing, and I still can't really sing. I just sing for fun while I'm driving. But had I pursued that from the beginning, maybe I would be a singer. Today is probably the hottest day of the year. Could be the hottest day of the year, and I spent a while of it in the direct sunlight, sunbathing. Now I'm doing some forest bathing. And it was sort of the later afternoon that I spent in the sunlight, mainly because I woke up late. And then I watched a couple of TED Talks randomly. Actually, one mainly. And the lady was talking about unconditional positive regard in parenting. And then she also said for oneself, to feel about oneself, unconditional positive regard. If one isn't being what one aspires to be in any given moment. And I think that's an important concept to apply if one is labeled with bipolar, because we can sometimes manifest reactions that we're really not happy with. And so yeah, just having unconditional positive regard for those moments as well. And I was reading a bit more of the Happy Chemicals book. It's kind of interesting, even though it's not my favorite to read about books that say, oh, it's because our genes want this, because our genes want to be replicated and passed on to the next generation. I know what they're trying to say, but it just sounds so boring. But they mentioned, like, whenever I read stuff, I sort of extrapolate it to my experience with so-called bipolar. For example, they talked about this other monkey experiment where an alpha monkey was put behind a one-way mirror so it could see its tribe, but the tribe couldn't see the alpha monkey, meaning dominant monkey, because of the one-way mirror. So the dominant monkey's doing these gestures of dominance, and the other monkeys in the tribe aren't responding because they can't see that monkey doing the gestures. But the monkey is unaware of that fact, doesn't know it's a one-way mirror. And each time that it does the gesture of dominance and there's no submission response from the group of monkeys, its serotonin drops and it starts to get really agitated. And so part of what I've talked about with myself in terms of what is the significance of bipolar, or mania as it's called, that heightened energy. I feel that that heightened energy puts us into something that you might compare to, I'm not saying it's the same thing, as this alpha monkey state. I don't think it has anything to do with dominance. I think it has something to do with sharing vision and light and new meaning and understanding that we can see. And so we're actually unaware that the others aren't able to see that, though they do sometimes mirror it back to us, so we think they can see. So when we're feeling like they can see and they're mirroring back our state, we keep going, but it doesn't go on indefinitely, because eventually it becomes like a one-way mirror. We're trying to share that energy, but it's not being received. And then that's when we start to get agitated, and when we get agitated, we fall out of that state. That's an oversimplification, and it might not have anything to do with serotonin. It might have something more to do with oxytocin or some other neurochemical that we don't even know about. And what I'm trying to say is, we go into some kind of heightened state and we're trying to share that, but when it's not responded to, that's when we start to lose that energy and whatever neurochemicals are associated with that. And it sort of, to me, points out a mechanism for how at first it seems like people are able to mirror us and we're able to share that energy, but over time the energy, if it's only going one way, you know, like a river, it just sort of eventually depletes. And that's where I think that something like dialogue can help, because it's sharing in the meaning in a certain way. So yeah, I read a couple things today that point out certain things about what I've experienced. You know, if they have research on monkeys on this, and it's not related, but I'm extrapolating it to that, to a mechanism as to why at a certain point we get agitated. Why don't we stay happy in so-called mania forever? Why do we eventually get agitated? It's because eventually it's not mirrored back. And it is for a while, so it does do something. But we might have to release the attachment to it sustaining itself and just sort of do what we can when that energy's there, and not take it as a failure when it goes away, because it's not really personal. So lately, with the little bit of reading I've been doing and a little bit of thinking, my brain is sort of back in that place of wanting to point out the benefits of mania or whatever. And this book talks a bit about social dominance and animals and things, and I think we can move past that. And I was also thinking in terms of dominance and submission about how we submit ourselves to psychiatry, or it's a submissive position to be psychiatrized. And I don't think it's wrong per se. I just think if we get ourselves to a place where we don't feel we need to submit, then we don't submit. And I think the power lies in learning how to communicate. More or less. And another thing that I wrote down in regards to that Happy Chemicals book was that how the animal does a gesture of dominance, and if the other animal reciprocates in terms of submission, they get serotonin, or they get that boost of the neurochemical. So it's actually the action that they need to get, the action they want in return in order to get sort of the reward of serotonin. And if they don't, serotonin drops. So this to me shows a mechanism of what I've been talking about with myself in terms of epigesturetics, and how it's the gesture, and there's certain traits and gestures of so-called mania that people do mirror. And in that mirroring, there's a sharing. It's not even about dominance. There's a sharing and the acknowledgement of the beauty and the ecstasy and the joy of being alive in a human body. And it's not about any certain thing that's needing to be required in order for that to be so. It's just true. It's evident in the energy of the moment. And that energy, I don't think in terms of needing to feel it all the time, but I do feel that when it comes in, it helps to mirror those gestures. And if, say it's to do with oxytocin, sharing and bonding in the knowing of the ecstasy of being a human being. So if one in mania is feeling that and they do something, like say they smile or do a little dance and somebody else smiles at them, that's sort of the acknowledgement. And they're not trying to do the dance to prove to someone they're doing it better or anything like that. It's just an acknowledgement of the joy of being alive as a human. And so it's sort of an exchange of that. And the joy of being alive and being human doesn't require any certain kind of cause. Like, one could access that no matter what they have. If it takes something in particular to get that state, then it's no longer that. It's reward and punishment, and the dopamine and serotonin reward in terms of social dominance and things like that. And the energy of mania doesn't really have anything to do with that. I think for sure there are elements mixed in. There can be mixed states. Not mixed states of like mania and depression, but mixed of the energy of ecstasy and the causeless wonderment of that, and also the energy of the brain storing memory associations in order to navigate the theory of mind that we've created as the world and get rewards based on movement in the brain cells of that, which has nothing really to do with anything. So, and then since most of the world around us is designed for the way it's designed, we do eventually get swallowed up and submit to old brain states, and just like the monkeys who get angry when they're no longer being mirrored, though I think this is a different mirror. It's not submit to me, it's totally different energy. Then we go kicking and screaming back into the old social order. And there was something else that came to mind, and then it went away, but it'll come back. Oh yeah, the other thing I watched was about a researcher named, I think her last name was Dweck or something. She's from Stanford, and I heard about this through the talk of the lady talking about parenting, and she mentioned this researcher who talked about mindset, and it's either a person can have a growth mindset or I think it was, I don't know what the other one was. That's probably cute that I have a growth mindset. But I don't know, it was something about static, or how our intelligence is inborn. So some people think how they're born and how they are is their capacity. And then she was saying other people have a growth mindset. So the growth mindset would be about learning from challenges, and something in the bush over there. It's a squirrel. And so the growth mindset is learning from challenges, and then the static one, or whatever it was about how people who, if they have a problem that they're given that is above their intelligence, they sort of shut down. And anyways, it's a good talk. I can't really summarize it. What I wanted to point out from it, though, because she was saying how there was a class on a native reservation, and this woman, she got her PhD. This other woman, she got her PhD from Stanford on learning, and she went back to her reservation where she grew up, and they were the lowest in the state, and she created a growth mindset learning environment where the kids were able to, in a couple of years, be at the top of the state. And, you know, their socioeconomic status was the lowest, but they were able to beat, in terms of math and language scores, they were able to beat like the affluent people of Seattle or whatever, the kids that were affluent. So they're making the point, and what they were teaching the kids, what they were basically saying to them at the beginning of the school year or what have you, of course I'm not saying this all right, but in general, they were saying, we care about you this so much that we're going to spend 6 hours today helping you grow your brain. So they were teaching the kids that your brain can grow. And the one researcher said that one of the kids made a comment, "You mean I don't have to be dumb?" So you know, usually in schools, kids spend so much time just trying not to look stupid. And so they're starting to teach in schools. It's the very beginning of creating a learning environment for growth and rewarding effort and strategies and progress rather than getting the right answer the fastest. So I took a class last year about education. It was really interesting, and it talks a lot about this sort of thing. How, you know, a kid will show you their work and they'll look to you for your reaction, and that's more important than the work they actually did. So they sort of taught in this course that I took about asking about their work, not giving them, oh, that's good or that's bad. So I've talked a lot about this with myself, like moving beyond good and bad. So what I was thinking about this, with all this research that this lady was talking about with young kids in school, of the the static mindset versus growth. So if they're teaching young kids, hey, you can grow your brain, you can become smarter, I think this can be extrapolated to people who are diagnosed with a mental health condition. And I'm going to say bipolar because I don't know about the other ones, though I feel they're likely on the spectrum of the same sort of thing. So for bipolar, when people are put on meds and everything, they're taught you're supposed to be the same as you were. All of a sudden you change so much that we're uncomfortable. We want you to be static. So we're going to medicate you into being static and how you were before, more or less, and fit into the society as it is. So to me, what I've been talking about with myself with this whole bipolar thing is how our brain goes into an extreme state of neuroplasticity due to the increased energy that comes into the mind and an organism. And so I would say, hey, this is about growth. You can grow as a person, you can grow beyond personhood to take perspectives of nature and animals and all of humanity, and not only from our limited view that we've been conditioned to have, and reward and punishment based on the self. So this is a very small introduction to that idea. But imagine if people who were diagnosed with bipolar were taught the same thing. Hey, your brain can grow. You went into other states of consciousness that you probably don't have all the neural circuitry for right now, but it'll come back, the energy will come back, and each time you can practice seeing how to be with that energy. And we're going to watch what strategies you use and the progress you make and the effort you make. And when you fall out of that energy, we're going to be here to help you. We'll help you get food and shelter and everything for those times when the energy's not there, and your whole nervous system and brain is going into a sort of rest period. It would be similar to someone playing a video game for so long and their hand gets tired, they have to take a break. So I think the same thing can be applied, that our brain can grow beyond the structures of consistent personality that we developed as sort of survival mechanisms. I do think when the energy comes in, we move beyond survival and we go into joy and thriving. But then sometimes that amount of joy and thriving subjectively is seen to not be also objective. I feel that state of thriving would create like a superhuman organism cooperative that would create structures for people to learn and grow and try different strategies. We would design that kind of world. And even the woman in the study, she said that something about kids, when we learn that this is true, that the brain can grow and we can become smarter and more intelligent. It's not an inborn thing. Just like the personality is not inborn, it's sort of trained in. Then it becomes almost a human right to be given the environments for that to be potentiated, for that to be made possible. And that statement that I heard in her study of, children's learning, and how schools aren't adequate for that, but they could be designed in a way that the kids become smarter and they realize that they can. It's the same thing I feel with bipolar, is that I feel the environment's not designed for someone to keep going with that energy long enough to learn how to figure it out. It too quickly becomes captured and it submits to I need to be how I was as my personality was up until the point when this energy came in and changed everything. And I do really think that it's evolutionary. It's not a mistake. Like this whole mania thing, it's not a mistake. And it's how it's approached and how it's punished. You know, and if our brain goes into a different state of receiving a different type of, I don't want to call it a reward, like a boost. It's almost like as we're able to be that way, it starts to change the genetics such that it can build new neural circuitry to be able to gesture and hold that energy. That's not a reward, that's like redesigning the human body. So yeah, that teacher created an environment for brain growth to happen in those children. And I think that a similar environment can be created to help educate people who get a bipolar label how to grow that neural circuitry. And I think this is where dialogue comes in, because in communication, if someone does a gesture like of dominance and then the other submits, they're basically being a mirror. A mirror is basically machinery. And I don't think that is our destiny, is to be this machinery like that. So in terms of, dialogue would be openness, listening, sharing. It's a different type of communication than the machinery of thought. And I think that we as bipolar people need to learn a type of communication that works, because for a while it seems that people are mirroring that joy, but then when we feel like we need to convince people or do something in particular and it's not working, we get mad. So I think realizing that a lot of it works in the unseen realm can get rid of some of that need for immediate feedback, because the whole dominant submission or what have you is immediate feedback. But if we're not looking for immediate feedback or trying to get it, then perhaps we won't elicit the response of the machinery of psychiatry to put us in our place, put us back in our place. So what I'm trying to point to a little bit is that we can create co-learning strategies and learn together in order to understand this more. And also by doing that, we create sort of a bubble that keeps out the response of psychiatry, because it's a response if we do something that makes it come and get us. Even to the point of the other day where I was clicking my phone without really realizing it, and that would call the emergency services, you know? It's still embedded in the body and the gestures to call for help. And it's really hard to get to a point, or it's challenging to get to a point where one doesn't feel the need to create that kind of scenario consciously or even unconsciously or subconsciously. It can still happen. And I've seen this in how the police got called on me in October, and then I saw it in the drama that tried to be created in June. And then even just a few days ago, my body trying to bring in emergency services, you know? And like I said, a lot of this works in the unseen. So expecting to be able to see that others see what we see, how can we even know? We can't know. even if somebody speaks like it seems like they can see what we're saying, we don't know if they do. So we really can't know. But we can communicate anyway. And I'm not saying I'm there yet, that's for sure. I don't know. I feel like my energy is coming out of the needing to create drama level of energy, but you know, there's always a few more months from now when it'll come back and try to create some drama again. But I'm wondering if one creates a type of communication where one's just communicating like this, however this is, and not expecting any kind of feedback that it was something good or anything like that. Needing a result, like if we think we need a certain result, then we're saying we know what the future holds or what it should hold, and that is grandiose for sure. So lately I've noticed that I've gotten several emails being like, oh, forest bathing is so good for you. That was one today by, you know, it's not by any people in particular that are into forest bathing. It's just, I'm getting emails about that. And, you know, the value of sunlight or infrared light or red light, you know, we're not getting all the sun and blah, blah, blah. So I'm just doing my thing in the forest and in the sun, and I'm getting emails about how it's good. So maybe that's the feedback. Maybe people are picking up on it, you know? Well, you don't know, and neither do I. And that's okay. This is a gesture walking through the forest. It's timeless.